Welcome to the station of decapitation without your head. I'm Nasty Neal, and I'm joined by RY Barrett, Johnny of In a Violent Nature. It's very cool to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Cheers.
Yeah. So, how did you get involved in Violent Nature?
Well, it was I got an email about the project, and I knew that they were had already started shooting. They'd shot a bunch of the film ahead of time and ran into a bunch of problems, and they actually lost their actor who was going to be the Johnny, and then they went through a handful of other people. I think even like some crew people tried to step in, and it just wasn't working. And then they had all sorts of problems. They had I don't know, torrential rain and just everything you could imagine. So they had to shut down production and kind of restart the whole process. And so that's when they got in contact with me. And then I had a meeting with Shannon and Peter and Chris, and we kind of just talked about the whole thing. They explained the sort of flip of the script for this. So that was really exciting to hear. And then from there, we started moving forward.
Yeah. So, did they have to refilm like a lot or the whole thing? Like, how much of it was
Good
originally
amount.
filmed?
I want to say anywhere from like 60% to
Oh,
70%.
wow.
I think so. Yeah, they reshot everything. I think the only stuff that ended up staying in the film is like establishing shot stuff.
So, when you see the actual script, do they explain this all before you look at the script? Because I assume the script is unique looking since there isn't a lot of dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, it strangely is really well written still. Chris is a good writer. You can tell that he reads a lot. So it was still really well written and lots of explanation, and it was kind of more about the motivations of the walking. Whereas he'd explain the what part of the forest or where Johnny was coming and going to, but then it was more about the describing of like everything that happens in between the walking scenes, and in very detailed manner. So all that gruesome stuff was in the script line for line, and
Yeah.
it all ended up on screen.
Was the script really technical? Because like a lot of the scenes, like to work, like I don't, yeah, I can't imagine they'd be just like, oh, just improvise something because like when you walk around the cabin, like everything's very like it would have to be specific
Yeah,
to nail it.
it was very technical. And I think that's one of the things that like some people watch it and they're just like, oh, it's just a guy walking in the woods, and I mean there's definitely that aspect to it, but it's very much like a puzzle of a film. All these little elements had to kind of piece together in order to form what it is, and a lot of that the special effects and everything that had to be designed way ahead of time too. So it was all very technical in the script and very detailed, exactly what was going to be needed there. So it was really cool reading the script and knowing these guys, knowing the work that they've done. Um, just imagining in my head what they were going to pull off with
Yeah,
that. But sometimes you read that stuff in a script and it doesn't end up on film the same way, but it did with them.
yeah. And since you mentioned it, it's a very divisive movie, which I always think is like the usually the best movies. Like either someone really likes it or they really dislike it. If people are just like, nah, whatever, like it's usually kind of a run of the mill movie. But how do you take that criticism? Because there are people who really love it, and there are some people who really, like you said, it's a lot of watch.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it the same way you do. I think the best films out there are they divide audiences, and I think they kind of have to be that way because otherwise no one would be talking about them, and they're just they'd be run of the mill or forgettable or just wouldn't try any big swings or anything. So the the hate that comes with it, I mean, I don't get why people get so worked up over something when there's so much content out there that it's like you didn't
I
have
think
to.
I think that across the board on everything. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I do too. I mean, there's so much to love out there, and there's so much to like spread what you love.
yeah,
So like, why go out there and just shit on something? But I
yeah.
mean, I get
Especially
it.
an
It's not.
independent movie. Like I
Yeah,
don't know.
exactly. Something that was made with not a lot of money. We're not a big studio project whatsoever, and the writer director was just trying to do something different.
Yeah.
So we 100% knew that this was not going to be for everybody, and Chris even joked about it. He's like, I wrote this movie for 5 horror fans. So like we're just surprised that as many people have
Yeah.
connected with it. So we're just
So
happy about that.
along those lines, when did you know like, oh, this has a buzz to it? Like this is like this is hitting people. This is something that people are into.
I was probably, I guess, when we found out we got into Sundance, or like leading up to that, because we had shot the movie, and I knew it was gonna get into some festivals and get some good play, just knowing the producers, they get their stuff out there, and Chris is talented. I had faith in the movie from day one, but I just never knew that it was gonna blow up like it did when we got the Sundance call, and we got into another festival, and they actually asked us to pull out because they wanted us to screen, but it was still kind of not 100%. So we were all sitting there just crossing our fingers and waiting. And then I got the call from Chris, and I was just kind of, my mind was blown. And then it was from that point on that things just really started kind of ramping up with it.
Yeah, and just for people who don't know, like for festivals, a big thing is if getting the premiere, and that could be the world premiere, the U.S. premiere, different area premiere. So it is like important to have like a big. If you're going to premiere at a big festival, like they want that. That's part of like the prestige.
Yeah, I mean I mean, you get the prestige that kind of comes with it, but then it's free marketing on top of that right off the bat too. So and then on top of that, the IFC and Shudder marketing team has gone above and beyond with this film too. Like they really took advantage of what they could do with Johnny and all that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, like the ads are great, and it's always makes me happy. I go see just about everything that comes out, but it makes me happy that like independent horror movies play theatrically. So when I was seeing it pop up, at the AMC, I was like, "Oh, this is cool. This is actually going to be playing here, and it's been doing well."
Yeah, we're still blown away. We're still kind of shaking our heads that it's actually still in theaters and stuff too, and has made money. And it's just kind of it's usually, being someone who's made quite a few independent Canadian horror films, sometimes you get a little bit of a theatrical run, like at some review theaters, and you get into festivals, and then it like hits streaming or like hard copy media and stuff. So for this to be doing what it's doing, we're just kind of it's wild.
Yeah. So when you said Chris said like we're making this movie for 5 horror fans, so I assume you're a slasher fan, because I think the movie like makes the most sense if you're a long-term slasher fan, because it's like, well, what was Jason doing in between all these other things happening? Like, how do people get from point A to point B? Why do people why is the killer walking and he could still catch up to the people? And you see that in A Violent Nature.
Yeah, it was, I mean, Chris has a huge affinity for the genre. I do too. I know Shannon and Peter do, and they're just cinephiles. They know everything about films. So going into it knowing that they were gonna do something different and fresh with it, and then me being a huge slasher and genre fan myself too, it was just a lot of fun to get to play this character that, yeah, you've watched all these films growing up and franchises and everything, but you've never gotten to see this kind of version of it. Even though there's some other films that have done like perspective stuff, there just hasn't been something that really did it this way.
Yeah. I've seen it twice down in the theater, and there's obvious scenes I think everyone knows, like gets a great reaction, comedic reaction. People are laughing, even a couple horrific scenes. But the second time I watch it, I noticed there's like a lot of dark comedy throughout the whole movie. So did you see that right away, like when you're reading the script, or was it more something like you saw after you see the movie?
It was there's a handful of stuff that was in the script that I definitely was like, oh, this is funny. And then other stuff that in the moment you notice that it becomes funny because it's so excessive and it just keeps going that it's like you have no other reaction but to laugh because it's just so much. And then there's some other scenes that actually use that against it. It like kind of flips its head with the Ranger scene. Like that's one that is so excessive, but it's not funny because it kind of turns that dial there. So those were all, I mean, that's all Chris. So he was hoping that the jokes were going to play, and then that scene was about, kind of putting it in your face and just being like, no, this part's not funny.
Yeah.
But it was all
kind of plays with the audience. Like, so it's like you said, when there's a lot of walking, some parts of it's kind of like, does it really matter the people's conversation, since we're really just wanting to see the kills? And then when you're kind of in that mindset, then you said like the Ranger, it's like, oh yeah, well, should we be laughing at people getting killed? So there's a lot more to the movie, I think, than just the idea of a slasher movie.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, some of the laughs were a surprise too. Like when you watch it with the crowd, you forget a certain moment, and then all of a sudden there's a laugh there, and you're laughing with them. So it just, it works. It's
yeah.
And I think that some people probably don't expect that going in to see, because all you hear is the about the gore kills,
Mhm.
and then it's about this like slow paced kind of ambient slasher movie. But yeah, there's definitely laughs in there for it.
Yeah, and the both times I saw it, it was in Boston, and people really responded positively to the movie. You could feel like they were into it, and there was big laughs during, especially one particular kill. I don't want to spoil the movie, but it's a big part of the movie, and it gets a great reaction from the audiences I've been.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
I've seen it 3 times now, and it gets the same kind of reaction. I keep recording it whenever I get a chance, because I just like recording the reaction,
yeah,
because it's so funny to watch and just to be a part of.
yeah. So, did you watch any other, like? I assume like you're probably a horror fan, but did you watch anything in particular to play Johnny? Like to kind of get into the mind, or did Chris like this is something I'd like you to watch? Maybe something that people didn't expect.
We had a couple of meetings where they showed me the German film Angst,
Oh,
which
okay.
follows around basically like an escaped crazy guy, and it gets dark. But it's such a very artistic horror film that is shown like from a certain perspective. And then there's another film, I forget the name of the director, but it's the British version of a film called Elephant, not the Gus Van Sant one, but it's also a following film. It just follows these. It's like episodic, based on real life killings, and it just follows somebody as something happens. It's a pretty disturbing flick too. And then personally, I went back and watched as many slashers as I'd seen or and couldn't find in the past. I watched new ones, The Final Terror, Just Before Dawn. I mean, the Burning was always a favorite of mine, and
Yeah.
All the Fridays and all that stuff. And then My Bloody Valentine. I tried to pull little kind of bits from each of my favorite kind of performances of those, the original Halloween, and then on top of that, I watched a bunch of animal attack videos,
Oh, interesting.
mainly like bears and wolves and stuff like that, just to kind of get an idea of how to abruptly change up a pace when somebody's or a creature is walking through the woods, just being kind of at one with nature, and then suddenly they just turn into this killing machine. And it was just kind of my motivation to just keep that in my head all the time.
Yeah. You named some ones I really like. I think The Burning has always been underrated. So same with My Bloody Valentine. I do think like it's found its audience so
Oh
over the
yeah,
years.
yeah. Those are a couple of my favorites. I mean, I love Black Christmas too, but it's kind of not necessarily a slasher, because you don't
Yeah.
see a lot of that. It's more about the paranoia with that one.
Hmm.
But The Burning and My Bloody Valentine are like they're up there.
Yeah, and I always like it when there's some different weapons of murder. So you get pickaxe and you get the hedge clippers, but and you've got hooks, which are fantastic in the movie.
Yeah, that was Chris trying to come up with something like that, like iconic, like exactly what you're saying. Jason's got his machete, and Leatherface has his chainsaw, and then yeah, he wanted to do something with Johnny that he could be creative with those weapons. So
Yeah,
he
and,
tries
and
to get creative.
yeah, not just I think when you hear the engine revving, I think probably a lot of horror fans like, oh, here comes a chainsaw scene, and then it's
Yeah,
not.
yeah, exactly.
How difficult was the log splitter scene? Because like it seems like very a lot. It's all like in camera and like watching the second time, I was like kind of watching it. First time I just watched it as a movie. Second time I was watching like that scene, trying to you see like where the cuts were
The
and whatnot.
technical, yeah,
Yeah,
that was the last scene we shot for the movie that I was with them. If they might have done other pickups, but that was the last scene we shot. It like right before Christmas. I want to say 2022. It must have been. So they had always wanted to go back and shoot that scene, because we had only shot the stuff up to the ranger being dragged inside of the cabin. But Chris always wanted to get that in there, and it was just kind of always a question of we couldn't he couldn't find a log splitter the way that he wanted it to kind of use it in the film. I'd like they were searching it and sourcing it, and it just didn't have a mean enough look. So he actually ended up designing and building that log splitter himself, and it's actually manually run. Like that thing doesn't it's not real.
oh
So there was somebody like pushing the
yeah,
pipe through, and like somebody else was off camera just slightly shaking it, so it has that motorized look. But so he built that whole thing. We ended up shooting that right before the holidays, and there was so much blood. Like that scene was supposed to go on. They were going to actually do each limb and then end with the head. But by the time they did the first arm, and then they're like, the blood just started flowing. There's so much of it
Yeah.
that they're like, I think Chris made a decision at the moment. It was like, you know what? He's like, we don't need to do, because it would have gone on.
Yeah, I feel like a 20-minute scene or something.
Yeah, it would have kept going.
Yeah.
But I think he realized in the moment, he's like, you know what? We got enough. We got enough to make this scene work. And it was honestly a logistic thing too, because I couldn't. It was a locked off shot so that they could do the effect with Reese, who played the Ranger, and so they can make it look like, you know, his eyes are still blinking.
Yeah.
And then you got to bring in the dummy, but then you can't mess up the blood with footprints, or else it's not going to match.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a logistic thing too, that it just kind of had to work that way. But I mean, I think it works. It's pretty gruesome.
Yeah, no, it definitely works. And I love that you see the eyes, because I was like, oh, well, he's there then. And so, but
Yeah.
it worked both times I saw. And my brother, for some reason, I don't know why, but he knew what a log splitter was right away when I watched it within the second time. And he was like, oh, it's a log splitter. I'm like, how did you know that?
Yeah, like there's ones they do exist that are like that, but that's a very specific. He wanted it to look just gnarly and like have kind of a really industrial old school look to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, he built that.
So when you were talking about like going over, or it's in the script, like the motivations of the different walking and I guess just of the character, like what is it like to film those scenes? Because I assume they're a little bit even longer, than you cut them down. And I don't know, you're in full makeup. I don't know, like if that's heavy and hard to see. And so
It was, yeah. I mean, depending on like the terrain changes up quite a bit for where we were shooting. Like it'd be very rocky, or there'd be tree roots everywhere, and like a narrow path of field, even just seeing where you're going. So one of the big parts too was making sure, like we'd always walk the path ahead of time, make sure everything was going to be cleared for not just myself, but for Pierce, our cinematographer, who'd be right behind me basically. And we always tried to keep, you know, a certain distance for each, depending on what the shots were. So we always tried to find a speed that we'd be in tandem with the entire time. So it was kind of a bit of a dance with us, keeping time through the whole thing. So it was, you know, it had its challenges with that. And then the visibility, sometimes the mask, there were different versions of the mask. Some of them had a big open area so I could just see clearly. But then if I was doing any turns, I had to like make sure not to turn too much so you could see my nose sticking out or anything.
yeah.
Chris designed the mask to have the eyes be removed so that they could be put back in when we got up close. So that helped a lot. It was really nice having somebody consider that, because a lot of times when you're doing creature stuff, it's more about just the look and not about the functionality of who's inside of that thing. So it was cool having that consideration, and then being able to use everything about that character.
Yeah. Just from doing the show, you know, lots of people on the show said like for example, Chatterer from Hellraiser 1 to 2, that's why they have the eyes, because the first movie is completely blind in the suit and couldn't see anything.
Yeah, I think it's like trial and error, right? You do something, it looks great, but then you're like, but we can get them to do more things if they can see a little bit more.
Yeah, it's probably also why Chatterer is just kind of standing around in the first movie. But yeah. So what was the difference between so when you have the big mask on, do you not have, you know, the face of Johnny like underneath?
No, so that was, so they had the stuff you see walking behind where it's the bald head.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big cowl. So I'd pull that on. It went down to about, you know, like here, and then it had an open face. And then when we did the effect scene where I take the mask off and you see it, that was only one specific day where they did the makeup, and Steve Costanzi came on and did it was about a 3-hour makeup job, I think, somewhere around there, where he like did all the prosthetics and then made it seamless attached to the cowl, and there was like teeth and everything in there. And then that was just the one day. Otherwise, I just had the mask on, and they would put a blackout paint around my eyes just so you couldn't really see into the goggles.
Yeah.
But they fogged up anytime you got close enough to see Johnny's the glass. They were pretty foggy anyway, so you couldn't really see in.
Yeah. Steve from the Astron 6 movies.
Did.
Oh, cool! I didn't know.
So him and Chris Nash are good friends. They go way back, and they've done a bunch of work together. So they together kind of designed the kills, and Kostansky helped, or I don't know who did the most of everything, but they literally formed all the body parts and all the special effects and everything too. So it was he kind of, I think, did it ahead of time, did the designs and everything, and then on the day there was other special effects people there and kind of helped out with everything.
Oh, cool. Yeah, he's been on the show a few times. I'm a big
Yeah,
fan. I actually didn't know
he's
that. So
very cool, a very talented guy.
yeah. And so when you said going over the motivation, there's like backstory to your character throughout the movie, and you really don't even know what Johnny really is at times. You know what I mean? That's because it's all like legend and stuff. But do you and Chris like go over like the actual like this is Johnny's backstory? This is like what he is, and you have to tell me what it is. But do you yourself know?
I mean, we a little bit, like to a degree that it's like we know that this is it like a supernatural character creature coming back from the dead, but then not too much in detail about that because it's also I think part of the mystery is adds to like the creepiness of a character. I think that's the thing with like Michael Myers and
Yeah.
Jason. The less you know about them, really, kind of they,
Yeah, because usually when not always, but usually when they do like a prequel origin story of those of like a character, it's not that great because it's like I think
yeah,
I'd
I
rather
mean,
not know than have it this or something.
yeah, I mean, it can work, but I
Hmm.
feel like it's creepier when you know less.
Yeah,
Like it just when you can't see that face behind the mask and you just see the actions, I find it just adds a little more I don't know, just mystique to it. And but yeah, we talked. I mean, we talked about what he is, and there's the story in the film, and it's kind of part of the thing too is the film is kind of supposed to feel like it's like the second or third entry in
yeah,
like this series, so it leaves open room for what that story is ahead of time, and there's probably two stories before this, and then I don't know if
yeah.
there's
The
if there are.
Ranger character especially brings up that there's been two stories.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Like the Ranger could be, he could be easily in a prequel, and then there'd be a story before that even too. So
hmm
it's kind of there's a lot of room there to play around with if we get the chance to do anything else.
yeah. So it's probably too early to know, but would that be something that you do you know of that like would be in the works, or it's something that you guys like would like to do?
I know it's definitely being taught. It was one of those things I think early on that there was never a plan for a sequel because it's kind of got that that original Halloween ending
Yeah.
that Johnny's still out there and spoiler alert, but just to kind of keep that the fear of him just being unknown and where he is. But I know it's also one of those things too where we're like, they made it. There's a whole lot of sequels to Halloween too. So if the demand's there and there's a good idea behind it, I think at this point Chris is probably just like writing a whole bunch of ideas down and being like, this might work, or
Yeah,
yeah,
because like you said, it could be like part one. This could be part three. You could do part one or part two the second, or you could go what happens after this to
exactly,
part
yeah.
four.
He could
So
go back in time and tell a prequel, or he could divide and tell half of the prequel and then jump forward. Like
yeah,
because
that
it's
would
a movie that's sort of different than the formula in general. You can kind of do anything with it. So I think that's a bit of a cool freedom to have for working in sequels.
yeah. When we talked earlier about the divisiveness of the movie, when you watch it with audiences, could you tell that, or I don't know if like a festival audience might be a little bit different than like a general audience.
Yeah, I was really wondering about that actually too, because when you do watch it with the festival, it's always you've got your very knowledgeable film people there, and then sometimes there's just some general audience too, but you're always expecting it to be like slightly different.
Yeah,
And from what I've seen, I've gone to a couple festival screenings and then a couple of public screenings now, and it seems like the same reactions. Like it seems like all the same beats and the right laughs at the right time. And like I was in a Cineplex and just recorded the audience during the yoga scene, and it was the same thing. There was one guy just yelling and hooting and hollering and clapping at the end of everything too. So
yeah,
it's yeah, it's I mean it's fun to see. It's unexpected every time still, but you're still just like, yes, all
yeah.
right, they got it.
I do kind of a theory about what even though I just asked it, but I do think because there are more weird movies being released at the theater than there used to be. And I think people just didn't realize there was a lot of people who they just assumed some of these festival movies might not be for a bigger audience. But I think they're just
Yeah,
out there and they like, people like movies.
I totally agree too. I think we have such a broad audience of people out there that like there's gonna be something for everybody in no matter what area, but you just never know who's gonna show up for what. but obviously this is kind of out there enough that people are looking for something like this, or at least willing to take a chance to check it out. So I think that's really cool. Even if they, you know what, even if people didn't like it, but they still went to the theater to
Yeah.
give it a shot. I personally appreciate that, because I just think it's such a cool thing to go and just see something different. Even if like I do it, I'll go see something if I hear that it's, you know, a different experience, and I'll check it out. I might not like it, but I'll appreciate the effort.
Yeah, and it's definitely a movie that people will debate and talk about. It's not. I don't think, a lot. I'm sure there are people who don't care one way or the other, but I see people talking about it as opposed to like they just go see it and whatever, they forget about it. But people actually talk about it afterwards.
Yeah, which is so cool. And I it's funny, I've hopped onto a bunch of random threads of either a post about it or something, and just read all the comments. And there's some people who passionately hate this film,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like call it everything in the book, and it's, it's fine, because there's always somebody who's defending it right after that comment too. So it's cool just seeing people being so either heated about it or protective of it, and no matter what, it's like if you're talking about the film, then that's a success for us. So
Yeah, yeah, and one of our reviewers, Troy Mikowski, he loved it, and so his review's up on the website.
oh, cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that was the one I read. I think you guys posted, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that was a great review. I really appreciated that.
yeah. He really dug it a lot. So, In a Violent Nature, it's still playing the theater. I was in Boston last night, and I saw it was still playing, which made me happy. And
Awesome.
since it's come out now, I've seen like you're going to do conventions, so it's already changed part of your life, I think.
Yeah, it has. It's kind of everything's been happening so quickly this. So I'm just kind of trying to keep caught up. But I had a few contacts about doing convention stuff, and I've done a couple things like that in Canada here, but never really toured around or did too much of it. And then I saw that, oh, yeah, I guess it is an opportunity if people are interested in talking about the movie and meeting. And if there's fans out there, I'm definitely down for going and see how that goes. I mean, there might be like 5 people waiting for me at the table, but
I mean, I think
I'll
it'd
go
be
check it out. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe down the road, you could do in costume photo ops and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've already done a bunch where I dressed up in the costume and did some like promotional stuff when we went to New York and New Orleans, and we did at Sundance too. So I'm sure we'll end up doing some more promo stuff like that too. And it's fun to do, and it's fun to like, get into character and scare people. And
Yeah. And it's cool. When before the interview, I looked you up on IMDb and you've got a ton of credits. So it's very cool to see like, now this is something that not the other movies aren't people things people should watch, but this is one that's standing out, and I
no,
like to see that.
it's true. It's you never know which one's gonna catch, right? And
Yeah.
we're still, yeah, like I say, we're still surprised with how much this is caught. But I hope that I hope it helps shine a light on some other Canadian independent cinema and genre stuff, and some of the past stuff I've done. If it finds a bit of a second life too, I mean, it all
Yeah.
helps each other, right? So
Yeah, and I think it's a completely other franchise, but I think Terrifier 2 really helped a lot of independent horror movies get a theatrical release when it had that big real surprise run.
definitely. I mean, like it did really well, like theatrically, and I think it showed that there's a want for that genre of cinema to be in theaters. So like anytime an independent doesn't even have to be low budget, but I mean it helps when it's low budget, because it kind of just proves a point.
Yeah.
That it doesn't, it's more about the idea and the execution and the passion behind it. So I love seeing anything that falls into that category and does well theatrically, because it's such a drop in the bucket. It's such a rare thing. And I just like seeing it happen. So
Yeah, and for people out there who on social media always saying, "Oh, all they do is make remakes and reboots, nothing original," but there's a lot of weird movies that come out, original movies, but you have to support them. So, go out and get a ticket, and that'll just mean that you'll get more of those at the theater.
yeah, definitely, exactly. And those are the films that I tend to end up, and I think a lot of horror fans end up connecting with, and they become cult hits down the line too, because like something like X comes out or something, and just not expecting that sort of thing, and then it creates this whole other universe basically. And
Yeah, now at the AMC, like the whole steps, was just covered in Maxine. And I was like, wow, this movie's
yeah,
really blown up over the last
exactly.
years.
So
Yeah.
like that sort of thing, and yeah, I don't know, just going out and seeing stuff like that. And there's the new movie, Long Legs,
Yeah,
that
I'm looking
Oz
forward to it.
Perkins. That I'm huge on checking that out too, and that looks like an alternative kind of film that I think is going to do pretty well theatrically too.
Yeah, and there's I saw the TV Glows out there. It's a completely
Yes,
different kind of horror movie, but really, I love this. Very weird.
I
And
want to see that. I've heard it's great too. It was at Sundance too.
oh yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It used to be I would go to the festivals and maybe the movies a year later pop up on Shutter, but now a lot of times, they go to the theater, a month later or something.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like you never know when what's the plan with that kind of stuff. We have a pretty cool plan set up. And I think it's helping people go to the theater to see it, because there is a window before it's going to be streaming.
Yeah.
So you don't immediately get that. You can't
And
just
horror
wait.
movies are the best kind of movies, that and comedy, to watch with an audience, I think.
Yeah, I agree. You get that communal experience, so it's a lot of fun. And like this one specifically, it makes you focus. I mean, because this also is the type of movie that you could probably put on at a Halloween party and just let play in the background. You can just kind of let it chill out.
Mm-hmm.
But when you actually get to experience it and have to focus on it, and you can't pick up your phone and zone out or anything like that, it kind of really does make the difference of what the film.
You keeps you in the movie you can't escape from it. It's there in front of
exactly.
you. Yeah, unless
It
you're an
gives you
ass,
that
I guess.
the whole like I find, because I can kind of separate myself from the film, because I'm not looking at my face the whole time or listening to my dialogue or anything. I liked being able to just sit down and watch it and kind of have this mesmerizing effect where it's just you're with this character walking through the woods, and then it just amps into complete carnage and then goes right back to this calm kind of relaxing tone. And I really appreciate how, like, I know I'm absolutely biased, but I appreciate how it like calms you and then shakes you up and then calms you again, and it just keeps kind of doing that.
Yeah, and I love the ending. I know that's another one that really separates people, but I think it really works and has maybe the most tension in the movie, oddly enough. But it's a great ending. And
I'm a big fan of Lauren and Andrea there, and they did such a great job with that scene too. And I specifically love it. Like Chris said that basically that was, he wanted to explore the idea of what's that conversation that happened at the end of Texas Chainsaw Massacre after she was rescued and they drive away. He's like, what was that conversation afterwards? And it it does relate to the film itself, but it's kind of its own thing. And you got this buildup of this character that's just out there, so it just keeps that tension kind of hanging the whole time.
Yeah,
so I appreciate it too.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. The ending of several movies, but especially Texas Chainsaw Massacre. What does the final girl? Because how could someone relate to what just happened to them?
Exactly. Yeah. Where does it go from there?
Yeah. And then it doesn't really stop. It keeps going. So, anyway, I really appreciate doing this, and thanks to Kat for us setting this up.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, guys. This is it's a lot. Yeah. Cheers, Kat.
Yeah, and congratulations on the movie, and soon you'll be too big to come back on the show. But if not, it'll be cool to have you back sometime.
Well, I doubt that'll happen. That would just be my head getting too big.
All right, thanks.
Cheers, man. Thanks for having me.